and welcome to the Lumberyard. Today we have a truly remarkable guest. I want to welcome Jeff Makey. Jeff is a nationally recognized instructional design expert from, let's say, employee training to professional certification as well. And his training programs and certifications have been recognized by the National Park Service and the USDA. He has created cooperative training or corporate training systems that have been in use for over 15 years. And in this episode, we're going to discuss how he has found many large construction companies lack the understanding of training and onboarding procedures as well. So sit back, tune in, and get ready for an inspiring conversation with Jeff. Jeff, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Jen. It's a pleasure to be invited back again.
And we were trying to come up with a topic a couple weeks ago, and you gave us a really good example when it comes to onboarding one national commercial builder that you were working with and training new hires. That they were taking their new hires and trying to train them directly from their SOPs instead of actually having an onboarding training program. Caused, major problems in their offices across the nation. So let's just kind of like open it up for discussion. Big picture, why is effective onboarding critical to the long-term success of employees in an organization?
Onboarding is probably the most critical training. Everybody says that. It's kind of well known, Jen. But what do we do? How seriously are we taking it? We're seeing the major movement and streamlining it with software systems, which is great. It's extremely valuable to do that. It can provide a lot more consistency with the software systems and the LMS, the learning management systems. A key term people are starting to learn that didn't know, LMS, learning management systems. So these are really helpful, but they're only as good as the information that we put into them, as the process that we put together. The training program lets the new hire know that you're concerned about them, that you want to set them up for success, and also helps them understand the culture and processes within the company. So it's absolutely critical. Having that training program in place and having those T's crossed and I's dotted can make all the difference in having that employee be successful within the company. What we found with this newest client, Jen, it was really interesting. We had several meetings with this new client, and they have their own training department. I can't mention their name, but they are a national commercial builder. They build office buildings, commercial development, and part of their leadership reached out to me and said, Jeff, people are making a lot of mistakes. Even though we train them, we put them through, we have all these steps, they go to different training with different managers, and they're still making mistakes. Like, they're asking questions that we went over. What's happening? So Jen, as I dove into them and I dove into this company, I said, what are you guys using to train with? And they presented me with their SOPs, their standard operating procedures. And I was looking at that and I showed them what a training outline should look like. And they said, we don't need that, we have the SOPs. SOPs are critical. That's your guidebook, right? Those are your steps on how to get everything through. But there are some points in that SOP that are frequently being missed by a lot of people. And there are other things that aren't. Well, why? What's happening there? What are you diving into? How are you presenting this information? And since they're using different managers to teach different SOPs, they're losing consistency. So one manager may really focus on this aspect of the SOP, and another manager may teach it completely differently, or just read it to the new hire, right? Just straight off, read it to them. We don't really know what's happening there. Right. So there's a lot of inconsistency coming out. They're getting different training from different managers, which can lead to confusion, misunderstandings, or just, Jen, honestly, just checking out, right? Thinking about other things. Yeah. So what we're seeing is that companies don't understand this key element to training. If you have your SOPs, you still have to have a training outline. That's been really difficult to educate this company. Once we really broke down that barrier, they hired us. once we got through that, but it took several meetings for them to understand your SOP is not a training document. It's your guidebook. It's how things are done, but it's not how you teach. It's not how you train. Like I said, once we got through to them on that, they were like, you're hired. Sign up, right? We're ready to go. So it's all about that training outline, and more importantly, it's about the objectives. Now, we talk about objectives all the time, but what are they? What do they mean for training? Well, you can almost look at this like reverse engineering. What are the most important elements in the training that I need to cover? So in your onboarding, Jen, we know that there's going to be multiple parts of onboarding, correct?
Absolutely.
Right, I need to train them on this system. I need to train them on this process. I need to train them on, this other process. So it's broken down into all these components. Well, what's the most important piece of information out of component number one? And maybe it's three things, like what is the most important? So an objective is how we identify the most important pieces. We can think of an objective as the basis for our test questions. Now, I'm not saying you need to have a test for onboarding, right? You don't. But if I was going to do a test, what are my test questions going to be? That's how we come up with the objectives. An objective should always include action verbs. So what is an action verb? Again, we're seeing this major disconnect with companies in general understanding what training is versus that operating procedure. So an action verb is the level of proficiency I want out of the new hire at the end of the training. Do I need them just to understand it? Do I need them to be able to analyze it? Or do I need them to be able to perform a task? Those are what we call action verbs. You can find these on the internet under Bloom's action verbs, but they're going to clearly lay out the level of understanding that you need at the end of the training. So rewrite that objective surrounding that action verb, which again is going to be the basis of all of our test questions. Now, one objective we may be able to get 5 or 10 test questions out of, depending on how much detail we need out of that particular learning objective. Typically in one section of onboarding, we may have 3 to 4 objectives. We typically say in a 2-hour class, 4 objectives. You can get way carried away with the objectives. You don't need to do that. They need to be broad and general, and again, the basis of what multiple test questions could be written on. So you start with those objectives, and they're going to identify, hey, this part of the SOP is the SOP is really important, and we really need them to be proficient at vetting the subcontractors, right? Ordering the material, recording the hours per project. So we need those things to be really, really important. So we're going to focus on that within our training outline. Any questions so far, Jen? I can keep going on this.
Yeah, no, I do because I want to. When it comes to the actual training itself, what have you found to be most effective? Is it them just watching a video? Is it for them doing actually hands-on, reading, watching somebody? Or does it just depend on what is that actual objective that they're trying to accomplish?
Yeah, it's going to really depend on the objective and the topic that we're teaching, that you're trying to get across in the onboarding. What we've typically found, though, is that any training that lasts over 90 minutes to 2 hours gets too long. You start to lose people. So breaking your training sessions down to that 2-hour mark, no more than 2 hours, is going to be the most beneficial to the new hires. Keep in mind, they're nervous about their new job, and they have other duties to do. If you're going to put them in training for more than 2 hours, they're probably going to get nervous about the other duties they're supposed to be doing. Also, it just gets to be overload. It's just too much. They need time to process it. They need time to think about it. So gauging the time, I think, is first of all the most important. Depending on the training, we have found that having a variety of media coming at the participant or the new hire is most important. It shouldn't be all video, but it shouldn't be all reading either. You want to break it up. We are the YouTube society, right? I mean, I love to watch YouTube, and I watch a lot of educational content on YouTube. I'm really big into adventure motorcycle riding and how those engines work, and working on my bike and riding techniques. And I've got YouTube channels, right? And I watch those all the time. That's a great way to kind of learn how to integrate your video. It should be short. It should have lots of movement in it. It shouldn't be one person sitting there talking the entire time. And maybe in a 2-hour training session, I have 30 minutes total of video, 15-minute section here and a 15-minute section there. We throw those changes out, a little video here, a little reading there, a practice exercise here if needed. Then when we throw that diversity up, we're keeping up with today's attention span, which, Jen, we know is nil, self-included, right? I mean.
Oh, absolutely. We were just talking about it. Yeah.
Yeah. So breaking that up as much as you can, having the shorter modules with a variety of content, media that you're presenting is most beneficial. I always recommend stay away from PowerPoint. Even interactive PowerPoint slideshows are way overused. A short video clip can be much more successful. Also, if we're breaking it up into different media, when it comes time to change or update that training, I'm doing it in pieces instead of rebuilding the entire training module.
Yeah. Okay. Good. So then let's talk more about like the objectives. So then going forward.
So with the objectives, we do want those to be action verb based objectives. As I said, 3 to 5 per 2-hour training session. That's your first step. That's really going to let you hammer down what's most important. After that, we need that timed outline. Even in a self-study LMS or a self-paced learning management system that the person is working their way through, that timed outline is critically important. Each section needs to have a certain amount of time in it. You say, Jeff, why do I need a timed outline if it's all self-paced? I can just write it down and produce the class. What if I need to do that in person sometime? That may happen. You can pick up that timed outline and stay on task with every single piece. Also, if you have processes that change, if you introduce a new SOP, I don't need to go hunt down different sections of the training outline. If it's timed already, I can very easily update it without recreating the document. All training documents are living documents. They're going to change dramatically over time. You may start out with one training outline and 10 years later, it may be completely different, but you didn't rewrite it all at once. You said, hey, this process changed. We're going to take this piece out and replace it. And then 2 years later, this process changed. And you're going to take this out and replace it. So that timed skeletal outline allows you the flexibility to change it as the corporation changes their processes.
And do you have, when it comes to onboarding, should it be only a week, a 2 weeks, a 3-week process? Do you have a general guideline when it comes to onboarding new employees?
I think that question is so subjective, Jen, to the company and the position that you're falling into. Some positions are going to be more technical and need a longer onboarding. I've had some jobs, like in facilities management. I used to manage facilities like campus settings, Jen. And there's no way I could have been onboarded to all those systems in a month or two. I mean, it took me 6 months to be onboarded with that job. There's just too much, right? I had 70 employees, security, housekeeping, maintenance. There were, 6 or 7 different buildings on a 40-acre campus. I mean, there's just, there's no way I could be onboarded into that company quickly. Like, that was just a long process. So it really depends on the position on how long it's going to take. Breaking into those modules even becomes more critical, though. That way I have something that's consumable, that I can digest, that I can bring back up later on and regurgitate it in those short time sections. And again, I think the software programs are really bringing that a long way. My concern with the LMS software programs is people are not taking the time to consider the content that they're putting in it. It's only as good as the content you put in it. And
data in, data out.
Is critically important, right? Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So when it comes to the training, how does just having a good LMS create or impact the company culture and retention rates?
Onboarding is the most important step for that retention, period. They've got to be bought in. They've just, I've always looked at hiring an employee like a marriage, because it is sort of, right? And there's going to be good and bad with that relationship, but both parties, the company and the employee, have to make a decision to come together. There's going to be hardship and there's going to be celebration, just like any other relationship that you have. So they're coming in to judge you just like you're judging them on that onboarding process. So the more time and care we take with that onboarding process, the more they will buy in emotionally to the company and really want to give more to the company, right? That's what we call engagement. So it all starts with that onboarding. How good can I get it? One of the things that I'm a really big proponent of are workbooks. You do have to have these employee manuals, right? The policies and procedures of the company. And we all sign those, right, Jen? You've signed those before. And
Oh yeah, don't even read through them.
yeah, how many of those have you read?
Yeah, none.
None. We just sign it, right? And then all of a sudden, something comes up and HR says, hey, it was in your employee handbook. Okay. So how do we get new hires to look at what's most important in that employee manual? Well, it's easy. We make a workbook. We make a workbook that goes along with it. Now, even in a self-paced LMS system where they're working through the steps themselves at their own pace, I still think it's critically important to have that workbook in front of them. How do we get them to interact with the workbook? One of the things we did for a local company, a remodeling company here, they started to branch out. They had one office, now they've got two offices, one here in North Carolina, one in South Carolina. They're opening up a third office. So how do they get that consistency within their team across different geographical locations? One of the big problems they were having is people understanding the meetings that they were to have with the clients and the content that was taking place in those meetings. So when we designed their onboarding program for them, we left the meeting agendas out of the workbook. And as they're working through the onboarding study, the onboarding paces, they get handed that particular agenda. Just the act of physically holding that and putting it into their workbook is going to make it easier for them to recall. Jen, we know nobody's going to remember everything from onboarding, right? I mean,
No, yeah, we're human. Yeah, that doesn't happen.
yeah, they're going to miss 50% of it. That's safe to think of, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, but what we do want them to remember is where to go find it. Did I see that? Oh yeah, I remember. I put that in my workbook. So just the act of physically taking that piece of paper and putting it in their book will help them recall what they did. And now they have a way to go back and find it and review it again. Online is completely different. Online isn't tactile. Remember, learning happens in multiple ways. Seeing, hearing, physically doing. We want to try to capture as many of those as possible. Putting that insert into the workbook captures that. They're engaged with it. Another thing, and I use the term workbook lightly, Jen, we don't have to have fill in the blanks. I think that's kind of juvenile for adults and professionals. Yeah. You don't need that. It can be as simple as steps of the SOP. One of the things I do think is critically important, though, is a lot of white space in the workbook. Again, it doesn't have to be fill in the blank. You don't need short answer. It can be the steps. It can be where to look. It's supplemental to the SOP. It's not your SOP. But putting all that white space on the paper encourages folks to write things down. How many times have you been to a meeting, been to a presentation, written something down on a piece of paper, got up and thrown that piece of paper away? You've done that, right?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Why?
Or it gets buried on the desk somewhere.
Yeah. Why did you bother to write it down if you were going to throw the piece of paper away?
Mm-hmm. Sure. But for me, it's also a retention. It means that I am engaging. If I'm listening and then write it down, it helps me stay engaged in a conversation.
Bam. You just nailed it, Jen, right? That's exactly the point. So having something that they're just not having to fill out on the screen, but that they're actually right. There's something magic that happens when we write something down.
Yeah, absolutely.
Something magic happens. So just encouraging them to do that. A fill in the blank is like juvenile. We want you to blank, right? I may remember some things easier than other things. So the notes I take could be very different than the notes that you take. And even if I never look at those notes again, the act of writing it down, something magic happens. So again, with this workbook, I use that term lightly. We don't need, questions and answers. We need the key points that we're trying to get across with lots of blank space for them to jot things down. It doesn't even matter if they go back and look at it again. Just encouraging them to jot it down is going to make a huge difference.
So then, in your view, what happens when organizations neglect onboarding and training? We talked about when they do it. What about when they neglect it?
That's why we're working with this client based in Texas right now. They have offices in every state, Jen, and people are failing at their jobs. And when people fail at their jobs, they feel bad. If I'm having to call you into my office and saying, why didn't you complete these steps? The employee feels bad. Most employees want to do a good job, right? The manager feels bad. I don't like writing up employees or retraining them. So when we neglect that onboarding process, we're setting up the individual as well as the company for some sort of failure. Keeping those employees feeling happy is good training, right? Bring them into my office and having to retrain them is hard on everybody. It just, it leaves you with a bad taste in your mouth and ultimately will lead to a bad company culture regardless of how hard you try to make it good. If I come to work and I can't succeed at my job, even though I'm trying, that's not my fault. Now, if I'm not trying, it's absolutely my fault, right? But if I'm coming in, I've got a good attitude, and I'm still failing at all the steps of my job, there was something wrong with the onboarding. Eventually, I'm going to leave the company.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, and that is your negative impact of that. So let's talk about actually measuring, right? How do we get metrics into this? So what metrics or feedback loops should organizations pay really close attention to?
There's a lot of ways we can get metrics out of training programs, and one, Jen, is just general performance. That should be pretty simple, you would think. And again, this company that we're working with right now, that's why they called us, because their general performance is failing. And they reached out to us and scheduled meetings with us. So that's your first metrics. How successful is the team? Is everybody moving? Of course, we're going to have hurdles, Jen, right? I mean, there's always problems, right? But how successful that they are at following and understanding the processes. As your company grows, that will be really relevant, and you're going to see it. Like, you don't need special metrics to measure that. Another metrics, though, is you can do tests. Testing, but it definitely has its place. And it is definitely going to give us instant feedback. Is it the most helpful feedback? It depends. I encourage testing if there is a safety certification going, right? Something that I need to be able to prove that I taught you that skill. Fall protection, for instance. I might have practical testing and or written testing for setting up and using fall protection because I need documentation that somebody saw you proved, you demonstrated that you could do the fall protection. But for an SOP, I may choose not to do testing because as soon as I say the word test, how does that make you feel, Jen?
Ugh,
hey, we're going to have a test at the end of this. Yeah, anxiety. And then you're trying to, what's the test question going to be? What's the answer to the test instead of freely thinking about the content? So testing is a way we can get a metrics. It's not a very good way. Peer-to-peer training is a great way to get that matrix. Hey, Jen, you've been here with us about 6 months. Can you help onboard Marty? Can you show Marty the systems and get her started in the LMS and walk her through that? Okay, now you have ownership because you're helping the company, even though that's not necessarily your job. Yeah, I'll get Marty started on that. You watching Marty and your level of comprehension with helping Marty get started is another metrics. If I say, hey, Jen, can you help get Marty started? Most people want to help. That's just human nature. We all want to be helpful. And if all of a sudden you're like, yeah, I'm not really comfortable with that. Why aren't you comfortable with that, Jen? Right? Like, what makes you uncomfortable? And so that's another way we can gauge that matrix.
Having like a mentor-mentee relationship within an organization then.
Yeah. Also, peer-to-peer peer-to-peer education and training in general is underutilized. Managers are not unlike parents. If you're a good manager, you care about your employees and you want them to succeed, because with their success becomes my success. So we have to talk about a lot of things with our employees. Some of them are an SOP, other things may be guiding them through their professional career. Career advice, career leadership, and sometimes it's like, hey, you just can't do that at work. Just like I do with my teenage daughter. Hey, this is okay, this isn't. You're not in trouble for this unless you keep doing it, but I need you to go back. And so managers training employees is like me teaching my daughter to drive. Jen, I was a professional driving instructor for years, and I cannot teach my daughter to drive. I can teach anybody else how to drive, but there's a wall that comes up when I talk to her about it, right? Like instantly. We both throw the wall up. So when a manager is constantly training the employees, you're going to get some of that parental wall, right?
That's a good point.
Peer-to-peer breaks that down. Another thing peer-to-peer leadership can do and peer-to-peer training can do is the peer knows what the common problems are. The manager may not. The manager doesn't work in that SOP. The manager doesn't do that task. That's what the staff do. So I may be trying to train the staff focusing on this piece of it, but in reality, this piece is what most people struggle with. So peer-to-peer leadership, peer-to-peer training can compensate for that. Hey, Marty, I know Jeff told you, that this is a really problem, but really it's this over here that's more of a problem. You need to focus more on this. And that's what you're going to get. So you'll get engagement, you'll get ownership, leadership out of your staff. You'll get a matrix of how well do they understand it, how well are they comfortable with the information, which again goes right along with comprehension. Even if it's just, hey, if you have questions with the LMS, call this coworker, right? Don't call me, call this coworker. Even if it's just as simple as that. They're doing their self-study, they don't understand something, they have trouble logging in, they have another peer to call and reach out to, that could be enough.
Yeah, I think that's a win-win. It's a win-win for the new employee and it's a win for that established employee already. Because like you said, who doesn't like to help, right? It makes you feel good at the end of the day when you can help somebody. Yeah. Let's wrap this up. I can't believe we're already 30 minutes into this recording. I could talk to you forever, Jeff. But let's say we have a company, an organization does not have an onboarding right now. They're looking at it. Would you recommend to them to outsource their onboarding to get all of their training set up into like an LMS? Or is it something, do you have to have like the special skills to set this up, have a current employee already do this? What would you recommend for that organization?
At the risk of sounding like I'm self-promoting, I really recommend working with a third party on creating your first onboarding programs. And this is why. When I'm trying to do self-improvement, right? I know what I think is wrong with me, but what I think is wrong with me may not be what you think is wrong with me, Jen, right? Like there's a loss of self-awareness in some situations. So if you're creating your own onboarding program, you may not realize that there are holes in your SOPs. You just may not realize that they're there, because this is what you've been doing. And I found this as an owner growing my business. I didn't need certain processes. And then when I hired staff, I was like, damn, I've got to create a process for this now, because I just did it before myself. Now I have to have a process. So hiring that third party to come in and help you, the third party is going to flip over every stone. They're going to look under every rock, right? They're going to be flipping furniture around in the office, not figuratively, not literally. The clients that hire us, we tell them right up, it's like, hey man, we're going to find all of your inconsistencies, and it's going to be hard. And the last client that we wrote onboarding programs with said, Jeff, we're hiring you for the second program because we know you're going to look at everything. Like, you're going to scrutinize us so tightly that if we don't have a process or if it's inconsistent, you're going to discover it. And then we can fill that hole. Now, if you've been in business for a while and you have your SOPs and all that's ironed out, because over time it does get ironed out, right, Jen? So if you have those SOPs already in practice, you just need to train your staff on how to write these outlines, right? Train your staff on how to write the objectives. That's what we're doing with the Texas-based company. We're not writing their outlines for them. They have a training staff already in play. We're going to be teaching them how to write these outlines. So that's a whole different process. Their SOPs are tight. They send them to us like, holy crap, this is amazing, right? Your processes are solid. You just can't teach it. Let us show you how to teach it. So if you've never had onboarding programs before, work with an outside party to get them started. They're going to go through your stuff. They're going to scrutinize it. It's going to be painful. If you have all of that ironed out and your company is very successful, you have solid SOPs, bring in a consultant that specializes in training design and let them teach your company how to create those training programs. It's going to make consistency better. It's going to make everything move smoother.
Couldn't agree with you more. Well, let's go ahead. Let's end it on that. I know that we'll probably get together in a month or so and do another recording for the podcast. So with that, Jeff, any last remarks that you want to make before we end it from here?
It's always a pleasure to be on the show with you, Jen. I really have a good time.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you all for watching just another episode of the Lumberyard, and stay tuned for our next recording.